Hi.
Who are you?
Who are you?
That's me, Greg.
I'm Greg.
Shelby.
One of the reason probably I wanted to present on Jo Shelby's raid, I was reading something, and I can't even, like I'm like all you guys, I read all kinds of stuff. All the millennials at work and Gen Zers think I'm crazy because I read books.
Do they know how?
I don't think they do. So this is going on YouTube, and some of them might see it, and oh well, too bad. And one of the things I read was Jo Shelby claimed that he captured like 700 Union soldiers on this raid, and he claims that he got 1,000 recruits. And yet when he got done with the raid, the prisoners he captured were nowhere to be found. The recruits he claimed he got were not with him, and his cannons were missing. So I thought, that's interesting. Let's find out what really happened. But so Jim Irwin's presentation on the enrolled Missouri militia is going to tie into this. Kent's presentation from last month is going to tie into this. So there's and then the whole pilot knob, Sterling Price is going to tie into this because Sterling Price, his decision to invade Missouri, I think was based on his perception of what happened with Jo Shelby's raid, which I think was incorrect, but we'll see. So here's what we'll talk about, a little bio about Shelby, his actions before this raid, and by the way, Doug does a good job. I think he hacks into my computer to see what I'm going to say because everything he says in his newsletter, it's like, yeah, that's what I was going to talk about. Even the thrilling but pointless quote, that's in my presentation because it was the thesis of the major from CGSC that wrote the paper that a lot of this is based on. So there were a lot of raids into Missouri. In fact, I would argue that most of the Confederate activity in Missouri after Wilson's Creek was just one raid after another, and it's just depending on the size and the scope and the distance, never really an occupation. So we'll talk about all those precursors, talk about his raid, and we'll kind of evaluate how it went. So Joseph Orville, or J.O., or Jo Shelby, was born in Lexington. Okay, well, what other famous people in that area were born in Lexington, Kentucky of that era? You think of a famous Whig politician that was born in Lexington? Henry Clay. You think of his neighbor across the street, young lady that grew up with his daughters in the Todd family. Right.
Yeah.
So all these wealthy Lexington people all know each other. His dad dies when he's 5. His uncle commanded a regiment at the Battle of Kings Mountain, the Good Guy Regiment, who was the first governor of Kentucky, and his uncle was a friend of Andrew Jackson. Of course, everybody's tied to Andrew Flippin' Jackson in this era, right? Went to Transylvania University, and he's a cousin of Franklin Montgomery Blair, interestingly enough. Yeah. So he moves to Missouri in 1849 to work in his stepdad's hemp business. His stepdad is Benjamin Gratz, who's a Jewish-American businessman. B. Gratz Brown was named after Benjamin Gratz. B. Gratz Brown was a famous Missouri politician who I think changed political parties 18 different times. So anyway, I had slides on them, and I cut them for time because we just can't go into all of this. So he moves to Waverly, Missouri to raise hemp, corn, and cattle. His stepdad kind of stakes him in that. Marries his second cousin, which I was like, you sure this is Missouri and not Arkansas? But Missouri.
Back then it didn't matter.
Yeah, these are pro-Confederate people, so, anyway. There's my slam. That's also going to be on YouTube, so whatever. He is a large slaveholder. In his first real political act in 1854, he takes 40 men to vote in Kansas. Takes 40 Missourians across the border into Kansas, right? So you know where his allegiances are. So 2 years after he gets settled, he's already active in, pro-anti-slavery politics. He says, he said this later, I was in Kansas at the head of an armed force about that time. I went there to kill free state men. I did kill them. I thought he went there to take them to vote. But apparently, he was there to do other things. I'm now ashamed of myself for having done so. But then times were different from what they are now, and that is what I went there for. We Missourians all went there for that purpose, if it should be found necessary to carry out our designs. So that tells you where Jo Shelby's head was at the time, right? So after the Camp Jackson affair, cousin Frank offers him command of one of these Union regiments in St. Louis, and he turns him down. He becomes a captain in the pro-Southern Missouri State Forces, and he commands the Lafayette County Cavalry, which becomes Shelby's company of Rangers, which is 47 troops. Now, if you pay to outfit them, and you pay for their horses, and you pay for their forage, guess what? You get to be captain. Now, it's a small company. It's only 47 troops, but congratulations, you're a captain. And they were first at Carthage. So they're at Carthage, and they're at Wilson's Creek. So we'll talk about, was it Totten or Totten? How do you pronounce that, Captain?
Totten.
Totten has something to say about the Confederate cavalry at Wilson's Creek. You had a lot to say about the Confederate cavalry at Wilson's Creek, how they were not managed correctly. They'll be at Lexington, they'll be at Pea Ridge, and then he's promoted to colonel. He'll be at the Battle of Helena that we talked about, I guess, earlier this year or late last year. Eventually will command the 5th Missouri Confederate Cavalry Regiment, and then he'll command what's called the Iron Brigade, which he basically had to recruit. So that's his kind of brief career up to this raid. So at Carthage, his 47 guys, they're the advanced guard for Raines' 2nd Division of the Missouri State Guard. His cavalry is the first one to detect Franz Sigel's movement, which give Raines time to deploy on line. Raines gives him 2 infantry companies to threaten Sigel's left. So already he's being given extra responsibility at Carthage. After Carthage, Price camps at Cowskin Prairie. Shelby goes north to Waverly, where he's from, to recruit. Now, Waverly is 30 miles or so northeast of Kansas City, pretty much straight northeast of Independence. Goes to recruit, but he gets 0 results of recruiting. Has to kind of forage from the countryside to get his subsistence, but he gets back to Cowskin Prairie unscathed. Okay, this is his first lesson in how to get around Missouri that's kind of controlled by the Union. Wilson's Creek, he's still in Raines' division. He's directed to the left flank, part of a flanking movement, ordered to flank the Federal right. He cannot do this because the terrain is really bad, but he's starting to learn how to command and how to lead troops in battle. Here's what Totten says. The enemy tried to overwhelm us by an attack of some 800 cavalry, which, unobservable, had formed below the crest of the hills to our right and rear. Fortunately, some of our infantry companies and a few pieces of artillery from my battery were in position to meet this demonstration and drove off their cavalry with ease. This was the only demonstration made by their cavalry, and it was so effete and ineffectual in its force and character as to deserve only the appellation of child's play. Their cavalry is utterly worthless on the battlefield. This is what Totten says about the Confederate cavalry that Shelby is a part of. Well, after Wilson's Creek, they go back down to southwest Missouri, and Price says, hey, go to the Missouri River Valley and start doing some recruiting. Your orders are to recruit and annoy the enemy in every possible manner. Keep alive the spirit of resistance by constant and unceasing effort. So this is one of several, I guess really the second dress rehearsal for what's coming. So really kind of the same terrain as his 1863 raid. He has some minor skirmishes along the way as he goes up and back to the Missouri River Valley. And so he was distinguished for his untiring energy and intelligence, furnished General Price valuable information in regard to the movements of various detachments, marching to the relief of Lexington, also in watching and guarding the neighboring ferries on the Missouri River. So he has a 3rd recruiting trip in the fall of 1861, and says Joseph Shelby brought his company down that night to try to annoy us by firing at our pickets, try to scare us by bombarding us with a 10-inch mortar loaded with mud. We called out Lieutenant Kelly and Gordon's companies and soon scattered them and silenced their formidable battery. You can dripping with sarcasm. Here's the assessment. In the intervals between battles, Shelby and his company returned 3 times to Lafayette County in the hope of recruiting a regiment. Few men were gathered, but every one of these expeditions to the Missouri River was a nightmare of danger and exertion, which none but the hardiest could endure. For days and nights the raiders marched, almost without rest, hunted on every side by hostile columns, snatching a few brief moments with kindred and friends when the home country was reached, and fighting there to wrest from the enemy the arms, equipment, and ammunition to replenish exhausted stocks and supply recruits. There's the key, right? They're not well equipped. They got to go steal it. They think we can go steal some supplies, get some cornmeal, get some meat, get some stuff to eat, get some horses, and maybe get some recruits. We know how they recruit because we saw that down in Pilot Knob, how they recruited people. They go, picture this, they go to Ellsbury, and they go to, the Gifford house, and, oh, hey, I knew your dad. Your dad, he fought with us gallantly, and Major Gifford, and unfortunately he died. I know you like that I killed you off. Man, Liam, you're turning into a big strapping young man. You know, yeah, I wish I could ride with you guys. Oh, really? Let's go, right? And they grab him out of the house against his will, and off he goes. That's how they would recruit. So this will be a familiar theme for all the Confederate raids into Missouri. So by similar nerve-straining marches, they made their way back over rough and obscure roads, beset by foes, still more thoroughly aroused to arrive in Arkansas on their last ounce of strength. This is the pattern. So Shelby at Pea Ridge, General Raines, the division commander, said he acted with his well-drilled company during the day with Colonel Gates on the extreme left, where he was much exposed and did efficient service. In the evening, his men were dismounted and served under Lieutenant Colonel Bowman in the gallant charge across the field. He commanded the rear guard of the retreat further down into Arkansas. Eventually, his troops went to Corinth and were not cavalry anymore. They became an infantry company. Well, Shelby sees kind of the writing on the wall after Corinth. He's given the rank of colonel, and he's returned to the command of cavalry. But they said, we're going to make you a colonel, but you got to raise your own regiment in Missouri. You're a company of these former infantry that have survived the siege of Corinth. They're going to form the nucleus of this new regiment. So, March 13th, 1862, Henry Halleck issues General Order Number 2, and it says, evidence has been received at these headquarters that Major General Sterling Price has issued commissions or licenses to certain bandits in this state, authorizing them to raise guerrilla forces for the purpose of plunder and marauding. General Price ought to know that such a course is contrary to the rules of civilized warfare. Every man who enlists in such an organization forfeits his life and becomes an outlaw. Now that's going to be important. Later at the Battle of Marshall, the decisions that Shelby makes, because he's read this general order and he knows, okay, as far as Henry Halleck is concerned, if we join one of these guerrilla bands, we have a death sentence. Now, Henry Halleck never, I don't think, executed one rebel because he's Henry Halleck, but this is the best recruiting tool they could have furnished him. All persons are hereby warned if they join any guerrilla band, they will not have captured, be treated as ordinary prisoners of war, but will be hung as robbers and murderers. Their lives shall atone for the barbarity of their general. Well, this is like grist for the mill if you want to recruit guys. So, and then Schofield orders General Order 19, which this ties into Jim Irwin's presentation. All able-bodied men are to join the enrolled Missouri militia. So you sign the oath, you join the pro-union militia. If not, you're a bad guy. So now you're forcing these guys to take sides. So Shelby goes recruiting, and he goes up to Waverly, and he recruits 1,000 men in 4 days. What changed? Well, the climate changed. These general orders changed the way people were thinking about things. So he leaves Waverly with 1,000 men. On August 18th, late 1862, he's under-equipped, of course. The goal is to escape down to Arkansas. Now, why do they keep wanting to escape to Arkansas, do you think? What is magical about that southern state line between Missouri and Arkansas? Any thoughts, any ideas? It's just a line. You can't even see it in real life.
No difference between it.
More sympathetic to the
More sympathetic to the cause.
Yes.
Not only that, but the laws that are enforced in Missouri are not in place.
Are not enforced.
You're on the right track. So the law said the enrolled Missouri militia and the provisional enrolled Missouri militia could not serve outside the state. And they're the main opposition in Missouri to these pro-Confederate forces. The 14th Iowa and the 32nd Kansas and the 8th Illinois that come in, they're not in Missouri for long. They get snatched up to go to other theaters. But the enrolled Missouri militia has to stay to defend against guys like this, who are also not that well equipped. So the Iron Brigade becomes a brigade. He's got 2,319 men, a regiment under Shelby, a regiment under Hayes, a regiment under John Coffey. A lot of these guys, you'll see again, I had hoped to do this after we'd gone to Springfield, because a lot of these guys will be in the Battle of Springfield, but didn't work out. So, First Battle of Newtonia, Confederates and Federals both need lead and flour, so Shelby, under Colonel Douglas Cooper, fights alongside a Native American brigade. They inflict a lot of Federal casualties, but they got to retreat to Arkansas because they don't have the numbers. The Iron Brigade will serve as the rear guard in this battle. Prairie Grove, which this could be its own presentation by itself, and maybe we will someday. Shelby's under John Marmaduke, and all the Arkansas Confederate cavalry are in a brigade now. The plan was to engage the Federals in northwest Arkansas. Shelby's the advance guard for this. but they encountered the Federals much further south, which was 5,000 infantry. Not conducive terrain to cavalry. Shelby splits his brigade up into all 30 companies to fight a delay, melt into the countryside, and allow Marmaduke to get away. So he's, again, learning his craft. Essentially, Prairie Grove would end up being a draw. Late 1862, here's how it shakes up. Marmaduke is in command of a light division. He's got Shelby's Iron Brigade, as we talked about. He's got a brigade under Porter with 2 Missouri regiments and 1 Arkansas regiment, plus Shelby's 3 Missouri regiments. Marmaduke's going to mount another raid with a division, this light division-sized element. So his job is to strike the enemy in the rear or the flank. Marmaduke decides to attack Springfield, who had a total force of about 6,600. Marmaduke probably had less than that. So the 14th Missouri State Militia Cavalry captures 2 of McDonald's troops. They lose surprise, but Marmaduke and Shelby don't know of this. So Federals know where they're at. Confederates don't know that the Federals know where they're at. They go to attack Springfield. The Federals arm everyone in town, including the Quinine Brigade, which is a bunch of invalids in town. The 18th Iowa's in town. 3rd, 4th, and 14th Missouri State Militia Cavalry in town. The 74th Missouri and Rural Militia are in town. In this battle, Shelby will capture his 2 artillery pieces that he'll use later in his raid. So after that fort, they capture some clothing, they capture some flour. They go to Hartville, where they run into all these Federal elements, and the Federals retreat, but McDonald's killed and Porter is wounded, so of course Marmaduke retreats back to Arkansas. So they're in winter quarters, not great food, not great forage for horses. New commander is named to the Trans-Mississippi District, Edmund Kirby Smith. Marmaduke's ordered to southeast Missouri to do another raid, so he'll take now a bigger division-sized element with Shelby, Green's brigade of Missourians, Carter's brigade of Texans, Burbage's brigade of Missourians. He'll go to southeast Missouri, and in that raid, 1,200 of his troops are unarmed. Now, you have and 900 are on foot, so you have 5,000 troops. 1,200 of whom are unarmed and 900 are on foot, and you're a cavalry force. Why do you take those guys with you? Seems dumb to me, but he took them anyway. You got to feed them, and they're going to slow you down. Well, he took them all. He was afraid they were going to desert. He was afraid as soon as he left with the bulk of the armed troops, all these other guys would melt away. This tells you the relative level of commitment of these Confederate forces. So Marmaduke takes them with them, and of course, they slow him down. His objective is to destroy the depot at Cape Girardeau, demonstrate towards St. Louis or Jefferson City, draw Federal forces away from Arkansas, and somehow recruit 50,000 troops. Now keep in mind, Edmund Kirby Smith at this time has 45,000 total troops in the entire Confederate Trans-Mississippi Department. Where they're going to get 50,000 troops is, I don't know. So Shelby's job is to divert attention away from Marmaduke's objectives, defeat the garrison of 2,000 at Patterson, and move on to Bloomfield. So actually, the Federals destroyed their supplies at Patterson. The Confederates got lost in the swamp. And Shelby covers Marmaduke's retreat. To assess Marmaduke's second raid as a failure is an understatement. But here's what Shelby's learning, right? Logistics. Hey, make sure you guys can be fed. Time of year. So this was in, what's this? This was in January, a dead of winter, I think, or February. Don't go then. Don't go when the weather's freezing cold. And don't take this whole giant force. It's going to slow you down, right? Don't head out when you're already starving. Don't do this in the wintertime. So Shelby's learning these lessons from Marmaduke's failed raids. Meanwhile, they have the battle at Helena. He's still under Marmaduke's division. He gets wounded. He says to Marmaduke, I think it's doubtful whether I'll ever serve in command again. What else happened on July 4th, 1863 while the Battle of Helena was going on?
Oh, that was,
Little skirmish in Pennsylvania.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Little thing going on in Vicksburg. If Sterling Price had just checked his Facebook feed or his text, he would have known what was going on, and he not undertook that. So August 1863, Ewing issues General Order Number 11, which cleared out that whole area that they're recruiting from. Little Rock's captured by the Federals on September 10th. And Price retreats from central Arkansas all the way to Arkadelphia, which is kind of west, southern. It's in the Boston Mountains. Things are really bleak for the Confederate Trans-Mississippi cause right now. So, timing. Shelby knows there's angst over General Order 11 because all of his troops are from that area. Somebody help us out. What was General Order 11? You guys remember this?
Is that the Kansas one?
This is in northwest Missouri. You know it.
That's where they burned the birthday group.
Yeah, they ordered everybody out.
Everybody
Yeah.
out.
Everybody out of those
You have-
districts and
you have to
destroyed
leave your
everything.
home, you have to leave everything, because that's good to protect them.
So he says, look, if you let me do a raid, this will keep the troops from reinforcing Rosecrans at Chattanooga. This will keep the good troops from leaving the state. We can raise recruits. We can damage any federal infrastructure. Plus, my family's been banished from Missouri, and I'm pretty ticked off. And Price is in charge because Edmund Kirby Smith is occupied. So Shelby receives Price approval. He also talks to Thomas Reynolds, who's the governor in exile, because Claiborne Fox Jackson had died. And they said, yeah, sure, you can go do that. And they really honestly thought they would never see the guy again because every other raid had been such a spectacular failure, but they thought, we're desperate. What do we have to lose? You guys have never been able to really raise any recruits, but maybe this one will work. Edmund Kirby Smith is away, so Sterling Price, Thomas Reynolds as the acting governor gives permission. So they leave from Arkadelphia, his arm still in a sling from his wound at Helena. Hey, if you can pull this off, we're going to give you a brigadier general promotion. So now he's got incentive. Privately, everybody thinks he's going to die, and it's a waste of time, but they don't tell him that. So he pares down his troops to about 600. So he's got a light regiment from Lafayette County. He's got a light regiment from Jackson County, light regiment from Southwest Missouri. He's got Thorpe's company, which is commanded by Lieutenant Elliott. And those guys, by the way, most of these guys are in federal uniforms simply because that's what they captured and they don't have Confederate uniforms. But Elliott's company out front is the Scouts, and they're outfitted with very technically correct Union uniforms. This is not a matter of this is not all we have. They've got the U.S. belt buckles, they've got the horses with the U.S. blankets. They are masquerading as Union troops as they go. And then Harris has got the 2 artillery pieces. So if you remember when the Iron Brigade was formed, it had 2,300 troops in August. Now it has 600. Now he left 306 unmounted, unarmed, or sick guys behind, which means he had 900. The regiments are commanded by a captain, a major, and a lieutenant colonel, because all the colonels are dead and sick. Jackson County, what other famous historical U.S. figures from Jackson County? Truman, right? So we're familiar with how his grandma hated his blue uniform. Right next to Lexington, Lexington's in Lafayette County. So he has one big Parrott gun and one 6-pounder. So big, what Parrott, Doug, you know better about artillery. Parrott guns are like what?
10 pounds.
Yeah, but still a pretty big gun to be hauling around with cavalry.
It's a big gun.
Not a great idea. The 6-pounder maybe, to haul around a 10-pounder, maybe not the best idea, but this is how desperate these guys are. This is what they have. So they fight with what they have. So he's got 600 guys. He had 2,300 troops in his brigade. Now he's got 900. He's taken 600 with him. So that's a lesson learned from Marmaduke, right? Leave your sick guys behind. So Elliott's scouts, commanded by Captain Thorpe, dressed in federal uniforms, carrying a federal flag, basically culled from all of Shelby's regiments. These were the best equipped guys. And for the rest of them, wear a federal uniform or go naked. So that's how bad it was. The opposing force, mostly enrolled Missouri militia, really garrisoned to defend against small bands of bushwhackers, not 600 mounted, fairly well-equipped troops. Basically, you have a company of enrolled Missouri militia at every county seat town, and the plan is that the bad guys come retreat to the courthouse, which is always brick or stone, and fire out of it till they go away. And the federal cavalry outnumbered Shelby, but they had coordination problems. There's 3 district commanders under the overall command of John Schofield in St. Louis. So They way outnumbered them, but they're all in different administrative districts. So they take off 60 miles out, they encounter 200 partisans, and they kill 79 of them. They take 34 prisoners, and of those 34, they execute 31 of them. These are not good dudes. Well, why do they execute them? Because in Arkansas, remember, it's now under mostly federal control. Arkansas is trying to put up an enrolled Missouri, just like the enrolled Missouri militia. They're trying to get that type of thing in Arkansas. These guys were former Confederate-leaning soldiers who had taken the oath of loyalty and enlisted in the Arkansas pro-Union militia. This enraged Shelby's troops. So when they found these guys in federal uniforms, they killed them. Aren't you guys all in federal uniforms too? Well, that's beside the point. So they had deserted from the Confederate forces over to the Union forces. The 34 prisoners they took, they killed 31. But guess what? This takes time. You don't have time to, get the prisoners, get their names, figure out all this stuff, line them up, put a detail together. You don't have time for this. You're moving and shooting. You got 600 guys. You've got to move. Already, I mean, as horrible as it sounds, but already they are starting to get bogged down. Second encounter, Company H&I, the 1st Arkansas Infantry, they really sound the alarm. They kill 10, they take 20 wounded, they take 50 prisoners, they execute more. There were African American soldiers in here that he executed. If he found any regular Federals that had always been Federals, he pardoned them. And little or no loss to him. But again, this takes time. So his 1st Arkansas, he's got to cross the Arkansas River. He crosses at Roseville, and then he rests for 3 days. Now, this is cavalry. It's a cavalry force. Why has he got to rest for 3 days? Well, horses got to rest.
Well, probably got to shoot horses.
Shoe them, feed them. There was a study done. I wish I could find it. That said cavalry across a 10-day period did not move any faster than infantry because of this reason here. They can move short distances really fast, but then they got to rest. So more delay. So this is impacting his mobility because, by the way, the last engagement they sounded the alarm. So they know something's up. We get reinforcements, 200 more cavalry under Colonel DeWitt C. Hunter, so now they're at 800. And they're at Bentonville. I don't know if they stopped at Walmart headquarters there or not.
You see the museum?
They cross into Missouri. John Coffey rejoins them with 200 more cavalry, so now they have 1,000. They've gone 250 miles in 11 days. In my mind, that's not...
That's about the same as a foot.
That's about the same as foot. Maybe less. I mean,
You
foot
could go
troops...
30 miles a day on foot.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to, but you could sustain 20 pretty,
Yeah.
So now he has 1,000 mounted troops at Bentonville, kind of the same terrain as in the vicinity of Pea Ridge. He goes to Neosho. There's 180 troops in Neosho, the 6th Missouri State Militia Cavalry, defended from the courthouse. Shelby he sends a company around behind him. He brings his cavalry up and he orders them to surrender. After 2 are killed and 5 are wounded, the remainder are captured, and he paroles them because they've always been Union guys. They don't find any deserters there, but this is his pattern for success. As long as he can run into a company-sized element, state militia or rural Missouri militia, he can steamroll them, sow havoc, and keep going. Now, by the way, he's cutting every telegraph line he finds because he doesn't want them communicating with Kansas City, with Jefferson City, with St. Louis. So he paroles 170 of these guys, so he claims. So this will add to his prisoner total. Who knows that there was really 180 troops there? He says there was. They captured 400 Sharps carbines and 460 Navy revolvers that were headed for those Arkansas militia. Well, that's good because he didn't have great weapons. He had a hodgepodge of weapons. So now he's got some revolvers, and some carbines. And he captures food, clothing, and ammunition. What do you think the clothing was? Federal uniforms, but So then here this is what leads to a problem. Oh, you were in Union uniform, we can shoot you. Well, that was all they had. It wasn't like this whole force was setting out to be deceptive. He was setting out with that advanced company to be deceptive, but goes to Greenfield again, rinse and repeat, right? But this time he runs into a company of the 7th Provisional Enrolled Missouri Militia. From Jim Irwin's presentation, what do you guys remember about them versus the regular Enrolled Missouri Militia? They're a little bit better equipped. They're more cream of the crop. Some of them are called from the enrolled Missouri militia. No shots were fired, and they did surrender. On to Stockton. Well, Schofield to Ewing on October 4th, he cables him. He says, I think their objective is Fort Scott, Kansas. Well, Fort Scott's down in the across from southwest Missouri. They've already pretty much passed Fort Scott at this time. Ewing received it October 5th, and he decides to go to Butler with 4,000 troops to try to intercept. So that blue dot is where Ewing goes. The arrows is where Shelby is. I'm going to start plotting on the map now these federal forces that are going to try to block him. So Ewing's like, I'm going to go to Butler. Schofield's like, okay, I want to wait and see what's happening. Ewing's already left to go down there to try to block him. They're already past Fort Scott at that point. John Edwards leaves Springfield with 1,250 troops. Now let's back up. Ewing's got 4,000. John Edwards, now this is the blue arrows, leaves Springfield with 1,250. So now there's 5,250 troops after him, his force of 1,000. He heads to Greenfield. He's ordered to wait and set a trap. That trap will never get sprung. Edwards will never play into this, but it's interesting. They go to Humansville on October 6th, so there's the black arrow. Basically, rinse and repeat. That courthouse was still there as late as 2010, but it's not there today. That was the county seat. It then moved to Bolivar, and the courthouse had no further use, and it kind of went derelict, unfortunately, in 2010. So, surrounded the town, fire the courthouse, demand surrender, take provisions. Like I said, rinse and repeat. They go to Warsaw. Company E of the Missouri State Militia is there. Part of Shelby's force flanks them. They rout them. Now they go 145 miles in 3 days. That's a little bit more than you would expect for a cavalry force. So you can see where Ewing is and where Edwards is. Shelby's already passed them. More federal reaction. The 1st Missouri State Militia Cavalry is in Warrensburg. They're ordered to march to Osceola. He's like, I don't think that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to go to like Clinton and Calhoun. So if you've ever ridden the Katy Trail at its western end, that's kind of where Lazier is. That's the train they're on, pretty flat. So now they're starting to try to spring the trap, and they understand now where Shelby's going. Where is he at? What's his location? They're starting to weigh in on this. You've got General Brown in Sedalia with 800 men. You've got the 7th Missouri State Militia Cavalry. You've got a section of 1st Battery of the Missouri State Militia Cavalry. This is where all these are going. Lazier is in a good spot to block him. And so now you got 4 separate federal pursuit columns starting to close in. They get past Lazier and they make it to Cole Camp, which is a German immigrant town. Shelby's men are in federal uniforms. The Germans come out, thank God you guys are here. They execute several townspeople and several pro-Union militia there. They move to Florence. The town is deserted because now the word's out. They get massive quantities of food so they can actually eat. And that's 45 miles in basically a day that they move. So you have another federal force, Foster, reaching Warsaw. He rides around Shelby to get there first, captures some rear guard, plants the rumor that the main body is right behind, lets them escape. Shelby skedaddles. He's not getting any rest. His troops are not getting any rest. He drags tree branches behind his horses to give the impression of a big force. He's only got 200 people. Shelby's got 1,000, but Foster plays a good deception game and forces Shelby to leave before he is ready. There's a guy named Thomas Crittenden who's on a train headed right for Shelby. When he sees in the town of Tipton that Shelby's there, he escapes back to Jefferson City on the train. So now you have a lieutenant. Now you have all these rumors, but here you have a lieutenant colonel. I've seen them. I know where they are. And he's in Jefferson City, which is the hub of all the telegraph. So now they have another definitive data point. They're starting to figure out where this guy is at. General George Kelly has some cavalry. He has a bunch of these guys. He has about 1,000 troops. He's the first near-peer threat that Shelby's going to encounter close to him. And he's at Sedalia, heading north pretty quick. So at Boonville, Shelby's Parrott gun axle breaks, which causes a 3-hour delay. And a 3-hour delay is a big delay. Boonville sends out a flag of truce saying, We love you guys. You're great. Don't burn our town. Shelby can either cross the Missouri River, head east to Jefferson City. Shelby thinks there's a garrison of 8,000 troops in Jefferson City. He can cross the river, but the problem is on the other side of the river, you've got a major with 2 companies, and you got General Brown moving north out of Sedalia with his 800. So, and the Parrott gun breaks again. So he's having problems. So he's still there October 12th. Colonel Lazier will attack at dawn, so Shelby will retreat to Jonesboro. All these skirmishing going on. Lazier basically outnumbers Shelby. Lazier's under General Kelly, so where you see Kelly there, that's really Lazier's force. So Shelby decides he better retreat to the west. So there's 2 main columns pursuing him. Brown's to the south to cut off his retreat. Shelby never crosses the Missouri River. So by retreat, I mean if he turns back south, and don't forget Ewing's still down there, Edwards is still down there. Brown is parallel to the south in case he doubles back. On October 13th, you have the Battle of Marshall. So Shelby thinks he's facing Ewing with his 4,000 troops, but he's really facing about 1,200, 1,100. He's soundly defeated. He has 1,000 men, and he thinks Ewing has 4,000. Shelby's plan is to attack through Ewing. So his plan, thinking there's 4,000 troops, I'm going to attack through those troops. Well, remember that order that Halleck gave. If we find you guys and capture you, we'll kill you. Well, he rallies his troops by saying, hey, by the way, you guys know that if they come after us, if they capture us, we're dead. So this kind of shows Shelby's breakout in the Battle of Marshall. We could do a whole thing on the Battle of Marshall, but this is the first pitched battle, only real big pitched battle of this raid. So he says, hey, if you want to surrender, any of you, you can do so. But remember, if you do, you surrender with our heads and halters, for these are militia, and you know what they are. Many of you have been captured before and released on taking the oath of allegiance to the United States. Well, that's a no-no. You are now fighting in violation of that oath, and if captured, are liable to be shot down like dogs. At the best, you can only expect incarceration in northern dungeons for an indefinite period. Which would you rather do, be shot like dogs, or rot in northern dungeons, or cut your way out with Jo Shelby? Well, they cut their way out at Marshall. Big losses, 15% of his force. So the federal losses are pretty light, and he has to spike his Parrott gun. So here's one of his 2 guns that he loses. As of yet, I don't see the 700 recruits or the 600 prisoners or any of that stuff so far. So now he's turning back south. So the Federals pursue for 8 miles and feel like they've done their job. Shelby's like, okay, I'm in trouble. I'm going to push I'm going to, as you call it, penny packet out my logistics, give everybody ammo, food, issue it all out. I'm going to push my ammo wagons and my supply wagons off the bluff into the Missouri River. Contrast that to Price's actions the following year with his supply wagons when he's in this area. What happens, Doug, you know? What happens with Price's supply wagons?
He keeps them until the very, very, very bitter end. They drag him down.
You think he could have learned from what Shelby did, because this was the right thing to do. There's one problem. There was a supply officer asleep in the back of one of the wagons because he was exhausted, and when they pushed it into the river, he got a slightly rude awakening. So Shelby is going back. Now, picture this. Every time they go to, as their horses wear out, they capture new horses, and they leave the worn-out horses. Can the Federals then use those worn-out horses to pursue? No. So Shelby has an advantage. He's got to stay in front. He stays in front, he can go to all the farms, get the horses. That's Shelby's advantage. The Union advantage is they've got these troops now positioned south of him. So Ewing is here, he's rested, he's got a chance to intercept him with fresh horses. But Shelby gets ahead of Ewing, so Ewing pursues him. I don't think Ewing really wanted to fight him necessarily. Pursues him to Carthage, captures 30 men, 200 cavalry under Hunter, split off. He takes a 6-pound gun. He's going to end up having to spike that gun too, so that's the second artillery piece that Shelby loses. The reason Shelby was able to get past Ewing is because Shelby knew how to travel off the road. He had been through here many times on his raids. His troops had been through here. Ewing did not know the terrain. He just knew the roads. So Shelby gets past him. Shelby's got fresh horses that he captured. So did Ewing. But Shelby gets ahead of him, so now every time his horses get tired, steal a new horse, leave the worn out one. Ewing's on worn out horses. As long as Shelby stays ahead, he's going to live. So Ewing's capturing stragglers. He breaks off pursuit and returns to Fort Scott. And John McNeil takes up the pursuit. Now they're still worried about Fort Scott. Ewing had orders to break off and protect Fort Scott. Under Neil, this is at least the 4th or 5th fresh Union column to take up the pursuit. He recrosses into Arkansas. He destroyed all the telegraph lines. He gets into Arkansas, he breathes a sigh of relief because he knows none of these enrolled Missouri militia can touch him legally now. And he reaches the safety of the Boston Mountains on October 24th. McNeil's cavalry pursued as far as Fayetteville. They were not enrolled Missouri militia. They were Missouri State militia, so they could pursue. November 30, he reaches Washington, Arkansas in the midst of an ice storm. The raid's over. So he reconsolidates with the remainder of his brigade, which were all sick or, whatever. So Shelby claimed he took 800 recruits. At best, they might have equaled the number that killed or deserted him, and I think 400 of those recruits were the other Confederate columns that joined him. Likely might have recruited 200 people. Claimed to, and by the way, were they recruits or were they just guys that they grabbed along the way? He had about the same number of troops when he came back as when he left. And he claimed to have caused 600 federal casualties. You can believe that if you want. So here's the reality. He was soundly defeated at Marshall. He lost 15% of his fighting force in that battle. He lost his artillery. When he recrossed into Arkansas, he was ineffective as a fighting force. Had no impact on anybody's strategy. 10,400 plus regular troops left Missouri at this time to reinforce Rosecrans and Grant. So one of his objectives was keep those guys from reinforcing Rosecrans and Grant. He didn't meet that. The enrolled Missouri militia, provisional enrolled Missouri militia, Missouri State Militia Cavalry were able to handle it. Maybe, didn't destroy him, but certainly thwarted his efforts. So he inspired a few diehards. He did cover ground pretty quickly. He knew the terrain. He knew the roads. And so they promote him eventually to division command. After this, they'll give him his star because he wrote a very inflated after-action report that talked about how great it was.
Who didn't?
Right, who didn't? 41 days, it covered 1,500 miles. That's pretty wild. And Price would later attempt this with 10 times the numbers. So here's my working thesis. Sterling Price, it served his purposes to believe Shelby's inflated account of his success. Because Price always wanted to go back to Missouri and launch a raid, because Price wanted to believe that all it took was just a Confederate presence for these, troops to flock to the colors, and Missouri's really pro-Confederate. And so he swallows everything Shelby's telling him. They have a big banquet for him, and they, man, this is great. And I'm sure they needed that banquet because they were basically half-starved when they got back. So that's my thesis. Price believed it because he wanted to believe it. It suited his purposes to believe what Shelby was telling him. And he used it as a pretext to launch his own raid the following year, which would start at Pilot Knob, right? Patrick Thales, who wrote the thesis at Command and General Staff College, I based a lot of this on, said the war for Missouri was a series of raids, and I think that's a good way to look at it. So after the war, not the whole Iron Brigade, but a good chunk of them go to Mexico, to the Veracruz colony. Shelby and most of the Confederates side with the French puppet government over the Mexican rebels. Anybody see the irony there? The rebels side with the guys fighting against the rebels. Anyway, returns to Missouri in 1867. He's elected federal marshal of the Eastern District. Died in 1897. He never officially surrendered. He was never paroled. He never took a loyalty oath. He was kind of an unreconstructed Confederate to the end. Final thoughts. You've heard of Jeb Stuart's ride around McClellan Hill. Brother Jo Shelby rode around Missouri. So he was kind of in Missouri they were like, oh, he's the best. He's better than Jeb Stuart. I mean, he's the dashing cavalryman. I guess it depends on what you'd like to believe, right? And Major Failed called it thrilling but pointless. So here's a couple of my references and questions. Yes. Oh, wow, 3 questions. Ladies first.
Did you know that there are markers and monuments about the raid at Old Town?
No, but I saw you nod your head when I mentioned it, so I figured.
Yeah.
Doris, you saw, here's the thing, I can't fake my way through this, because I got you, I got him in the corner over there, and you guys will not allow me to put out some nonsense, so you gotta be on your toes with this group. Matt, you had a question?
Well, I just was wondering about the Iowa. I thought Iowa militia or you didn't talk anything about them in this area, so they weren't part of the.
At this time, probably not. Now they were, next year there were some Iowa guys at Pilot Knob, but in this part of the state, probably not.
Okay.
There might have been some at Springfield. I can't remember.
A bunch of Wilson Creek.
Yeah, there was a bunch of Wilson's Creek, but at this point, I mean, at this point, they've probably gone east to greener pastures. Probably part of Grant's larger force or somebody. Thomas or whatever. Sherman, yeah. Douglas.
Steel.
At the Battle of Marshall, do you know how many Confederates were captured and what their fate was?
Unknown, according to the references I have. We don't know. So that they could have been killed. They could have been executed, possibly in the field. I mean, that went on both sides.
I mean, you would think that after that order was issued and they were captured, and a lot of them would have been captured in blue Union uniforms.
Yeah,
I just wondered how many were just executed.
summarily executed. So I think the Battle of Marshall is its own presentation. I think the Battle of Prairie Grove is its own presentation. I mean, yeah, I think we have plenty of ground to plow about Missouri, for sure. Okay, well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Where would you like to move?
Every year, or somewhere on the way, like, whatever, I don't know wherever he lives. I live close to here.
On the Hamel side.
How about Home Depot in Wentzville?
Maybe not.
Holy shit. When this group came in, we lost
You can
count.
tell us.
Well, we're going to Louisiana.
And
I
we
don't know,
had
it's like the
he had his wife.
You know,
Two sisters.
what was that back? There's something.
Some of
Whatever
the
Chinese
Right.
station was.
How many books is raised?
Because it was right up the side.
build around town. Arkansas too.
What about your parking in St.
The same floors.
That's
And he
a little
had
farther
two,
south.
yeah, we actually got it, but were.
All right,
One
Ended up doing our-
sick.
Okay, one more announcement. Those of you that are interested in going on the tour and would like to ride up, you're gonna meet at
Talk about bad luck.